you can just give me a thumbs up there as to whether we can share the screen. So for those of you whom I haven't met yet, because I know that we have one or two people that are joining us for the first time. My name is John North. I'm based here in George in South Africa. I'm going to be the host for the meeting today, but there are a number of people, including everybody basically on the call, that are going to play an important role on our call. So I'm going to, before we have a look at the agenda, I'm just going to share with you a few virtual participation tips that we thought would be useful. We did send these out just a few minutes ago, but I thought it might be worthwhile, since this is the first time that we've got so many people gathered on Zoom, that we just have a quick look at these. The more we look into the webcam and look into each other's eyes, the more connected we are. If you're not speaking, please try and mute at your end. We have a person on the call that is providing technical support, which of course is Claire Summer. So if you have any issues, just send her a chat message in the private chat of Zoom. But she might mute you remotely if she hears an echo coming from your end. You are able to switch between full group and speaker view in Zoom at the top left or top right of your screen. When we're in plenary mode, you're welcome to put up your hand either on screen or using the Zoom controls to add something if you wish to speak. Most of you that are using this medium will also know that if you want to applaud, you're welcome to applaud using the double hand raised above and kind of moving side to side. And then we also have some thumbs up and thumbs down messages. You're more than welcome to use the messaging facility, because we are trying to encourage as much connection and connectivity amongst participants as possible. Our work today, first of all, is to open and set the purpose of the gathering, which I will hold. Then we'll move into some check-in groups. So those are all the pink items are the ones where we'll be relying on our partners, associates, and friends to collaborate and to provide input and to drive the work. There's a section here in the middle where we will have some of the guardians and any board members on the call that are available to do a short reflection following the check-in. I will then provide an update on the GRLI since our last AGM meeting and introduce the strategic direction document. We will then have a second breakout discussion, which is specifically around our strategic direction, and then we will reconvene in plenary to hear some feedback. We will have we'll invite whoever is ready to share their feedback to have 5 of those on screen and the remainder of them in the chat, and then we will close. We're aiming to wrap this call up within 2 hours, maybe a little bit shorter depending on how it goes, but as always with the GRLI, this is a bit of an experiment, you know, as we find ourselves between carbon constrained and corona scenarios globally, increasingly there is the need for us to connect in these ways, and of course to keep the momentum going of our work. So before we move into the purpose of today's gathering in more detail, there's of course a number of important people on the call, but we're very fortunate to have one of the representatives of our founding strategic partners, EFMD, on the call. And I'm just checking that I can see him indeed. Matthew, are you around? I'll just see if I can see Matthew. Because I'm going to ask you, Matthew, if you want to just say a few words from EFMD's side also, because I know you might not be able to stay during the entire call.
John, thank you very much. Hi, everyone. I know lots of very nice people on the call already, and I've certainly heard and have goodwill about the rest of the people involved. Yeah, I'm obviously delighted to join. Our journey started with the GRLI almost 20 years ago. In 2001, there was the Responsible Leadership Summit in Bangkok with Anders, who was there, and that led into the GRLI, and I've had the great pleasure of being involved with the GRLI over the, well, as I say, nearly 20 years, with Mark, with Anders, with Bjorn, and obviously now with John. EFMD is and always will be very supportive. The world needs better leadership now more than ever, which is quite a strong thing to say, but it's so true. And I think we're very supportive of what you do. I have a great respect for John. Dan's also on the call, and he's been involved very much from the early days with AACSB. And what we want to do is obviously continue to support, but how can we have a little bit more influence and spread the good messages and the work that's going on? So delighted to join. I might duck out for a little bit, but I hope it's an interesting, and I'm sure it will be a very productive call.
Yes, thanks.
Thank you so much, Matthew, and very glad that you can join us. As you've already made reference to, we've also got some friends joining us, the likes of Dan from GBSN. I believe we have someone joining us from SDSN. I am just looking around the room whether Meredith is online yet. But it is, there you go, Meredith, great to see you. So we are very, very fortunate to be joined by a number of partners, associates, and friends. I'm going to briefly just outline the purpose of today's gathering in a bit more detail. And really, I'm conveying some of the words of Vanessa, the chair of the Guardian Group. Vanessa, if at any point you'd like to come in, you're more than welcome to add to what we have here. So we would like to take, we'd like to take some time today to, of course, share some of the ongoing developments within the GRLI and beyond, but also hear your thoughts and input around the strategic direction which we circulated previously and which we will continue to discuss today. Today is also an opportunity to really connect with some of the peers around the globe, and particularly to see how we can enable each other and how the GRLI as an ongoing collaborative inquiry can support you in carrying out your responsibilities day to day. So a number of you made some statements of commitment at the AGM event in November. This may be an opportunity to reconnect on some of that, or maybe to share some of the other developments and insights since then. And really, in a nutshell, what this hopefully does is it helps highlight areas where you'd like to engage in deeper dialogue with the GRLI, and helps us see where we can work collaboratively in the future. So we have for those of you not familiar with it, a few years ago, Mary Godfrey, I think one of the board members who's also on the call today, suggested that instead of just having a normal, boring annual general meeting, which of course AGM is often short for, we should really consider it as a place and space for all to gather momentum, all gathering momentum. And so this is the purpose of today, is to gather and maintain and build momentum for the work that we hold. What we're going to try is to facilitate a check-in, which we're going to allow about 15 minutes for. And the idea here is that we have roughly 10 or 12 people per checkout group. I'm just quickly counting the numbers. It looks like we're slightly more people than we originally thought we might be. So we'll split the group into breakout rooms. You'll be assigned into a separate Zoom room. We'll try and ensure that there's at least one guardian and or board member per group. And once you're in that room, it's an opportunity for each one of you to have your voice heard and to share either an update or progress on an essential action or an insight that has arisen for you since our AGM event in November. Now, of course, if you weren't at our AGM event in November, you may want to share something that is essential or insightful that you have worked on recently, or that is emergent within your institution or for you personally. This is, of course, connected to the agenda of developing global responsibility in leadership and practice. 3, 4, 6. We have 36 people. So I guess what we'll do is we will aim to have 4 groups. There we go. So you will get an invite to join a room, and as soon as you click on that, you will be placed into that room.
Are we all back?
No, I don't think
No, I
so.
think 2 groups are back. I think. Oh, you were moving about, were you?
I suspect Anders's group is still in the having coffee.
We're back, actually.
Hello, we're back.
We're all back.
Right. As you come back into the room, if you could just mute again, just so that we can avoid the echo.
John, just one note for you. I was keeping the time in Anders group, so we are back.
Okay, very good. So I think we've got everyone back, hopefully at least most of you had an opportunity to briefly share and to get to learn a bit more about where the energy is in the GRLI and in everyone who's participating today. So what I'd like to do now is just hold a few minutes for those who are guardians that are on the call and that were hopefully distributed around the various rooms, just to share some brief reflections of any themes or points that arose that they feel might be worth sharing out to the wider group. We thought it might just be a way of getting a flavor of what happened in the other discussions into the main plenary room. As that happens, and I'm going to hand over to Vanessa and the Guardians now, as that happens, I'd like to invite those of you who took any notes to paste them into the chat of Zoom so that we have record of those notes. So basically, you will just simply type here in the chat area and press enter, and then it gets shared with everyone, and it creates a text document which we have at the end of the call. So without any further ado, I'm going to hand over to the Guardians just for a few minutes of reflection in discussion with each other about what you've heard in your various rooms.
Thanks, John. Any of the Guardians like to start? Okay, should I start with our group? So, so I think the significant theme that arose in our group was around the quick and the pace of connection and the ease of connecting somebody's check-in to another person's work. So there were a number of checkpoints and connections that emerged, such as research leave and taking time for thinking, a theme around development of whole person learning, and moving that forward both from a practitioner of whole person learning, but also what does that mean for schools to develop new ways and new USBs within schools. There was a theme, many of the themes were in threes, so a theme around utilising the connections in the room. So Anna, you mentioned work that Dan would been involved in, and more the focus around stewardship, connection, and including others. So inclusivity. Some of us had been in the AGM, others hadn't been, but actually the value of the personal connection came through around that doesn't matter, it's how do we connect going forward and learn from each other. That was ours. Anyone else?
Sure, this is Chris Laszlo. So some of the themes that our group discussed were the emphasis on initiatives that focused on positive impact. Another topic was scaling at the level of universities, of whole systems, and then more student engagement. And I think a lot of the themes revolved around that. I would say really this shift to positive impact and scaling. So just to give you some examples, Wayne and others, Julia and others who were at Davos talked about the positive impact rating of business schools by and for students. Many of you will have seen that. That was announced at Davos. Hanna-Lena also talked about at the university level trying to go to carbon neutral by 2030, which is not actually strictly speaking a positive impact, but more a getting to zero. In terms of scaling, many of us in our group are working on trying to scale up either at the university level or at some other system level to be able to get sustainable development, SDGs, better integrated into the systems. So Filippo talked about working at reforming at the university level, the business courses. Adrian Zakari talked about responsible leadership course for 800 students at his university. Again, without doing justice to all of you who contributed your comments here, I think that those two aspects really stood out. Again, positive impact and scaling it across systems. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Casey, I think just hang on. There we go.
Yeah, so we try to have the
I think JC has just removed himself from the call by mistake. Anyone from another group that is ready just to share some highlights? Romina.
I was in the JC's group. Perhaps I can talk a little bit about what we talked about, if that's okay. We talked about the GRLI annual meeting that we were all in, and the impact that had on us sort of as a group and as an individual. We talked about the importance of connection to the environment, to the natural environment, and take time off for that, just to walk around and take care of ourselves as well as we take care of others. Just make sure that we don't forget ourselves in that. We talked about the importance of strategic direction that GRLI has put forward, and how it was important to sort of engage with that to create globally responsible leaders for tomorrow. I think that's kind of what we had. Claire, you have anything else I missed? I wasn't making notes.
yes.
So Romina,
Sorry,
I'm on 2 devices, so I'm moving far away to make the audio not be wonky. I think what's also essential that came up in our conversation was the idea that GRLI is a place to translate and facilitate useful research into powerful practice. So that's one other thing I'd like to add to it.
Great, thanks. And I see JC's rejoined us and is trying to add his 2 cents. JC.
No, I'm sorry because I couldn't hear what you said, but I'm sure it was perfectly what we.
Okay, any group that hasn't had a chance to feedback yet? Anna. Oh, you're going to have to unmute yourself, or I will do it. Let's just do that. Anna, I think you and I are both.
Now,
there we go.
Now
yes.
You can hear me. Yes. So maybe something to add, and maybe Meredith, you can also say something because you were taking the notes. So Anders was also talking about the strategic direction and the working with PRME, and I think Genola also was talking about that and about the Nordic chapter. And then we were talking about, or John was introducing his new book, Leadership Beyond Ego, and talking about that. And also, we in our group we were talking about this wider collaboration with different stakeholders, and about the students, how do they learn, and or about online learning and online courses, and the collaboration and wider collaboration also inside the universities. But maybe Meredith, you were taking the notes.
Yep, so I just summarized that and dropped it off to the side there as well. So a
Okay,
lot
thank you.
what our group talked about was just opportunity in general and the strategic directions paper moving forward, the books, the Routledge book that John had discussed that you mentioned there, the opportunities for publication and the opportunities for online learning were really a big theme in our group as well, and how to teach responsibility to a wider cohort and learning group.
Wonderful. And just looking around the room, is there anything else that people feel they need to share in plenary before we move on to the update and the strategic direction in more detail? Just looking for hands.
Well,
okay.
I just shared in the chat the call for paper on the Journal of Business Ethics and please share for those who are interested. Yeah. That's it.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And there will be more opportunity going forward for sharing. There was one person who had their hand up just as I said that, Mary.
I've actually added it to the notes, but in our group, there was something really interesting about, I think it was Elizabeth talking about the importance of experiential learning and involving the community in the learning. So it's not just students in isolation. They're getting an understanding of the whole context that they're in.
Great, thank you very much. And I can see in the notes that we've got your contribution there regarding what Dan had said, and Elizabeth and a few others. So thank you very much for that. So without any further ado, and I know this is not entirely perfect yet in terms of how it works, but we are experimenting today. What we're going to do now is we're going to move into a brief update about developments within the GRLI and in our landscape and areas that we work in, and then we'll have another opportunity just for any points for clarification. Of course, as I present this brief update, I realize that some of you are perhaps a little bit closer to some of the detail that I'm presenting on. So by all means, do feel free to jump in and correct me or add to what I'm sharing. So I trust that by now you can see my screen. Just checking for some nods. Can everybody see the presentation? Great. Very briefly, very glad to have, I think, both Richard and Daniel on the call today. My part of the update is to say that our earlier partnership with Emerald has been renewed as part of an alliance agreement, as many of you will know. I met last week with William Sun, who was appointed as the new editor at the Journal of Global Responsibility. And shortly thereafter, in our newsletter, we issued a call for papers as well as for board members. William's proposal is to have an editorial board, a review board, and an advisory board. If I think that's what he called a policy board. My apologies. A policy board, a review board, and then the editorial board. In a more traditional sense. So please do follow that link or check our blog for more details. There's also an open access opportunity within the new initiative that Emerald is taking. I'm going to just hear from Richard or Daniel whether there's anything that you'd like to just briefly add by means of coming in now.
Could I just sort of speak very briefly just about the open access opportunity, John? Because, I mean, there were two themes that stuck out to me in our breakout group. One was work overload, you know, and basically making sure that people don't get burnout, which is clearly an issue for everyone. And the other is knowledge transfer. You know, within academic journals, the building of knowledge is important, you know, but when you are writing an academic journal, you are writing for an academic audience. I mean, you may not be writing for them, but the readership is. Because all these things are actually behind subscriber walls, they go into university libraries. Now, in order to make greater impact, getting things to policymakers, getting things to practitioners is vital. And that's what this project is about. I mean, I think, you know, John and I have discussed it quite a lot. I think we're well aligned, but it's a pretty limited project. You know, we're only looking for a small number of pieces to make a collection. The pieces shouldn't be long. You know, we're not looking for extensive journal articles, 3,000 words, 5,000 words. It's about the nature of the content. You know, we talked about educating tomorrow's leaders. It could be a small group of best practice teaching methodologies. Now, you know, we've put the word out to the GRLI network in September, and it's failing at the moment. So, you know, I want this to work. You know, it's not a mad rush. It's not a great amount of work. It's about the nature of the work. And, you know, this is a flagship thing for Emerald. So if we can put something together, we will be really, it won't just be freely available. We will be really marketing it, trying to get the word out to people. That's my pitch. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Richard. Thanks for sharing and for the opportunity. Moving on, and of course, if any of you need to get in touch with Richard or Daniel, and you don't have their coordinates, just contact us. We'd also like to acknowledge that there was, and it's already been mentioned on the call, so I'm not going to spend too much time on it, that there was the recent launch of the positive impact rating, which is supported by a number of partners and associated. In terms of people that registered for today's call, I think Julia is on the call. I had thought that Matthias was also registered to be here, but for some reason I don't see you, unless, Matthias, you're going by another name today. No, okay. So I think Julia might just want to say a few words.
Okay, just testing, you can hear me? Okay, great. So thanks everyone. So this was our third, what we call a Dean's Dialogue at Davos. The first time we were invited, it was a joint invitation through Corporate Knights and Prime when they announced the first round of Prime Champions. It was really just a dinner where people were introduced and then a statement announced. And so following that, I contacted both Toby at Corporate Knights and the folks at Prime and said, if deans are going to come to Davos, why don't we truly make it a thought leader conversation and see if we can't have some impact into the agenda. And so we made some progress last year with two topics. One was, you know, what do we like and what we don't like about rankings? And then the other was sort of green investing, finance, the need to change our finance offering. So that was an improvement, and I appreciated the support of Claire as the two of us got together and wrote a report, which is posted to the GRLI website. We said we wanted to do even better this year, so we blocked 3.5 hours. We focused exclusively on ratings and rankings, and that provided this opportunity for Katrin Muffin team to present the results of the positive impact rating. And of course, we invited members of the Deans and Directors group within GRLI. We invited Prime Champions. We invited those ranked by Corporate Knights. Following the results of positive impact, and congratulations to the schools that were recognized. That project, I can answer questions if people want to know the details, but they essentially invited business schools ranked by either the Financial Times or Corporate Knights, and then using various student organizations with Oikos taking the lead. They surveyed students at those schools and used that data to identify those where the student perception is that the school is committed to positive impact. So it's unique in that it's global. There were schools from around multiple continents. It was really, really exciting to work. It's unusual for Davos to have a 3.5-hour meeting. Most are an hour long, standing room only, talking heads. So we're really trying to disrupt through our pedagogy as well. So the stakeholders in attendance had 45 minutes to discuss ratings and rankings and using an appreciative inquiry format, their wishes for the future. So once again, I'll be writing a report coming out of that, and we'll continue to raise the bar every year. So I think I've seen
Wonderful.
the thumbs up from John. I think my time's up. So I'll
Thank
stop.
you very much. Thank you so much, Julia. It's wonderful to have such active board members who are in a position to engage in those platforms as well. So thank you for the update. I'm going to just reshare my screen. Just let me know once you can see it. Okay, so moving on, continued alignment with ABIS. Unfortunately, Ivo can't join us today, but I am meeting him tomorrow. Maybe just two things to highlight there is that they will have the Knowledge into Action Forum focused on the circular economy in May. And then we do have Wayne on the call today. I don't know, Wayne, whether you would like to say anything about this, but one of the roundtables on integrated value are being hosted at Untitled. Maybe you want to say something, but no obligation.
Sure, just a quick mention of it to say that we want to bring together all the different approaches that are emerging around redefining value. So, of course, we have an approach here of integrated value, but we'll be relooking at shared value. We'll be looking at true value from KPMG, PwC's approach, the Value Balancing Alliance, true costs, externality costing. So really trying to look at value to society, that's BASF's model, trying to bring together and have a good dialogue about these new methodologies and approaches that are emerging. At the moment, the date is 20th of April, probably in Antwerp. The date might shift, but anyway, anyone who's interested, get in touch with me or keep an eye on the ABIS or GRLI websites.
Thank you very much, Wayne, and it's wonderful to see also how this relationship with ABIS continues to grow. Moving on, and I don't wish to put either of our friends on the spot here, but basically just to say that our board did mandate the exploration of alliances beyond ABIS as well, most notably with the Sustainable Development Solutions Network that is represented on the call here today. Meredith, it's wonderful to have you here. When we have Florencia back from maternity leave on the 11th or the 12th of February, I'm sure we will be in touch and looking forward to hopefully work more closely with SDSN. We've also initiated at a very high level some discussions with Dan and GBSN. Dan, I don't know if you maybe want to use the opportunity, and likewise Meredith. Oh, you are still there. Sorry, you disappeared for a moment. Either Dan or Meredith, if there's anything upcoming for your networks that you wish in 30 seconds or so just to share with the partnership here, you're more than welcome. Again, no obligation, but you're welcome.
Sorry, Dan.
No, you go.
Oh, just with Florencia being out, we're not really taking on any new MOUs or anything like that, but everyone at the Sustainable Development Solutions Network has been really excited about working with the GRLI in the future. Business schools aren't really an area that has been as tapped by this organization in the past. So while we are at a bit of a standing point for the next 2 weeks or so, I might say everyone is really excited to dig into more of the educational space in a more meaningful way rather than just online technologies for us. So moving forward, we're just very excited to be talking about this and be in the dialogues.
Thanks, Meredith.
Thanks for the opportunity. Maybe just a few things that might be interesting to the group. we are partnering with the Academy of Management on a small workshop in Mexico during their specialized conference, and it's focused on research that matters for Latin America. And it's part of a point that I made in the breakout that as I learn about the work of GBSN and the schools that are engaged in it more and more, I feel strongly that the local context matters much more than we realize, and we need to build the knowledge base. The second thing is that we are also, we've had to change the date due to some conflict, but we're working on an event with FDC in Brazil, the Foundation of Dom Cabral, on inclusion. And already we've gotten quite a bit of attention for the opportunity that that theme creates.
Thank you, Dan, and thank you for your continued engagement with our agenda, and we look forward to hopefully working more closely as well. I'm going to move on. There's an update. We've been quite busy, to be honest, over November, December, and in the last few weeks. So we thought it might be useful just to give a snapshot of where things are, certainly from the GRLI's perspective with regards to Prime. Late November, we had a discussion with the advisory committee alongside the UNGC consultant and the remaining secretariat, where we highlighted a number of things that we felt were quite important to consider in terms of the governance and the future of Prime. Those included, considering possibly making Prime an independent entity, the need for a unified and representative governance entity, which would have implied that we retained the advisory committee for the interim, and of course also to ensure that any appointments, if any appointments are made by UNGC at Prime, or any strategic decisions are made, that those are not made unilaterally during the interim. And those recommendations were communicated in late November. The advisory committee then received an email at the end of December thanking them for their services. This came from UNGC, and someone that is probably familiar to many of you, Denitsa Perg, at the president and CEO of Siemens, was invited by UNGC to act as interim steering committee chair, and I made it a point of immediately meeting with Denitsa, and also communicating to both Denitsa and the UNGC and other steering committee members a number of suggested guiding principles for the future governance and operations of Prime. I've included those, which is quite detailed, as an appendix to the slides that went out. I don't think it's going to be constructive necessarily to go through them, but I should add that in our late November board meeting, the GRLI board mandated the core team to continue supporting the development of Prime and the dialogues regarding its future governance. The board also remains open to the possibility of making the foundation within which the GRLI exists available as a possible host entity for Prime should the need arise. So that will of course only be considered if a broad range of stakeholders in the Prime community wishes to move in that direction, and of course there will be a number of considerations that needs to be had when, if and when it does get to that point. So we have on the call, I think, a few people that are probably quite close to, or were previously close to the governance of Prime. When I give this update, of course, we check in with the board and various partners and strategic partners. I don't know at this point whether I can invite Matthew, maybe. Matthew, if there's anything from your side, maybe just to add to this.
Yeah, sure. As I'm sure people know, the Prime and the principles were actually written by a former colleague of Dan's, Anne Graham, and sort of polished by AACSB and EFMD and put out into the wider network. And obviously for 10 years, Dan and I and AACSB and EFMD were on the steering committee, have been very supportive, have funded and put money in and contributed, given visibility, etc. And then a couple of years ago, we stepped off. You know, I think some people were saying, why have you done that? But you know, being very honest, it was that what was happening at Prime had very little to do with responsible practices, governance and trust. And for AACSB, EFMD and Amber to step back to say, you know, this is not how an organization should behave, the links with the UN Global Compact, and there was a web of things that came out that we just weren't happy with. Now, we have taken a step back. No one in their right mind can not support the principles. I mean, it's just very obvious. But there is a governance issue and there is a support issue from the UN Global Compact. And there's an element for us. I think the chapters are fantastic. I think the regional support, it gives great credit to the principles. But the reason we step back, and you know, it's nice, I want people to know, is because the leadership, governance, etc. of Prime and UN Global Compact was wrong. And at the moment, it's still not been rectified. And you almost get the impression that, okay, we've had a year on the sides, we're back in the game and everything's back to normal. And that's not fair to the community. So it's just so people know that.
A bit there, but I think we've got Julia coming in.
So one of the reasons the invitation went out so late to our Davos event was because Prime was debating on whether they could support it or not. And I think in support it, the question wasn't financial support, but whether they could support it with administrative support. And my point was that given that we'd already have two, to disrupt that by not having one this year would have been really problematic. And especially as we were preparing to launch the positive impact rating. So essentially I offered to provide the administrative support to the event this year. And so then they stepped back on. And I know they were very, very happy that we still had the event and with how it went, and have committed to continuing support it now for future years. The other thing, as I learned in that session, is that they are preparing to announce the new leadership for Prime. So they didn't share who it was, but they said that a decision had been made. So hopefully we can hear about that shortly, and hopefully that individual will be committed to addressing the governance issues.
Thank you, Julia. I'm just going to take one or two more comments, burning comments. I see we have Pierre's hand up. Pierre? Sorry, Pierre, I'm just unmuting you. Just give me 1 second. Let's just see. You need to unmute yourself, Pierre. I can't unmute you.
You have to remind that when Prime principles were written in 2007, it has been a real battle between people who were already working on this issue and have been working for the last for 3 years already, while Prime arrived and tried to capture all the work which has been done before through a bureaucratic pathway with a very prestigious logo of UN Global Compact. And it has been a painful experience since the beginning. And what is funny, if I can say so, is that 13 years after, this twist DNA is still there and is still doing damage around. So of course, Prime principles are excellent, and all the idea of inclusive principle and so on and so forth is remarkable. But the difficulty is that up to now, UN Global Compact has not understood how an academic community could just behave and just organize itself. The elections, the designation itself of the prime leadership without any input of the steering committee of what is the equivalent of the steering committee, of course, is a governance issue, etc., etc. And well, my point is that there are all difficulties which will not be resolved without a clear statement of the academic community, as it has been already the case, because when RCSB and EFMD went out from the steering committee, it was a very strong message. And I think you have to maintain a very clear statement around that.
Okay, thank you very much, folks, for the input and just the thoughts. I think this is not to necessarily stop this conversation, although we do only have limited amount of time. We have a number of things that we'd like to focus on. I should add that I did invite Lila Karbasi several times to participate in various meetings and discussions. She wrote to me this morning to say that she cannot participate this afternoon. So our current contact at UN Global Compact did respond this morning, and we hope that we can, working with other stakeholders, can help resolve and revive the initiative, because it is indeed a very worthy a cause, which many of us have put a lot of time and energy into. I'm going to suggest that we move on and that we focus on what we can do as the GRLI, and now shift our energy and attention to the strategic direction. I'm just going to share my screen again. As you know, I'm a recovering management consultant, and the slides are a crutch. So if I missed anything, and I know we did, I know that there's a huge amount going on within the GRLI's partnership and with the associates. If we missed anything, please do let us know about it. Let us amplify it. Claire Summer is standing ready to support you with blogging and tweeting and the like. So I want to make sure that that invite is there. The strategic direction work, as a simple background to it, which is that we did anticipate that in recent years the closure of GRLI and the winding up of the foundation in early 2025. So that would have been 20 years since the initiation of our work. But it does appear, as we can see by what's happening in the world around us, that our work is not complete, or at least not yet. And so following our AGM meeting in November, the core team, with input from a number of you, but really working on behalf of our partners, associates, the board and guardians, compiled a positioning and direction document as a starting point for this type of conversation, where our partners and associates and friends can comment, engage with the document, and hopefully help co-create ultimately a strategic direction that is meaningful and that makes sense for everyone. I guess there's no secret then that that the energy seems to be there for the GRLI to continue its work beyond 2024, as the previous strategic direction document stated. The way we structured the document, and many of you might already have it open on Google Docs, or you're looking at the PDF, there's a core section to it where we talk about what the GRLI is, who we are, what we stand for, what we do, how we do what we do, and then there's a as yet incomplete section around our role in collective impact. And of course, the invite now is in conversation, and we'll probably be smaller groups, I guess groups of maybe 6 or so per room, is to look at that document and to consider, what we think collectively and individually of the strategic direction, and whether there's anything that we are missing or that we'd like to see more of. So I'm just going to skip one slide back. Ahead of this call a week or two ago, in inviting reviews to the document, we asked you to consider what we've under or overemphasized, whether anything critical is missing, whether there's any fundamental errors or things that you're uncomfortable with, whether it remains aligned with our values and principles, which for the moment remains untested. And then, of course, to what extent the direction that we're suggesting excites, inspires, or challenges you. Maybe those are too many questions to cover in the next 20 minutes discussion. But what we're going to do is we're going to, again, break into small groups. Hopefully, you'll be in a different group because it's randomly assigned. During that discussion, we're asking that you focus on your initial impressions, with reference to some of the questions that were circulated, plus anything that you feel is missing or that you would like to see more of. When we reconvene in plenary, we will invite, depending on how much time we have left, we will invite 4 or 5 people to just share very briefly their hopes for the future direction, okay? In order to help harvest the work that we're going to be doing in the next 20 minutes or so, we would like to ask you to take notes in Google Docs as a comment on the document, or in the chat, in the main plenary chat. So in other words, type it in a text document and cut paste it into the main chat, because we would like to harvest as much input and comments as possible. So as it stands, we have on the call still, let me just see how many people do we still have on the call. I'm just going to stop sharing, and okay, so I'm going to split into 5 groups. We're going to split into 5 groups, which means we will be 6, maybe 7 people per group. I will check into the groups as we go around. I think we may need to just clarify 1 or 2 things before we split that, and the first person is Mary.
Yes, John, I just wanted to check, if we're going to type into the document, I think each individual has to be logged in to the Google Docs.
Okay. The other option is to use the comment function. Mm-hmm. And when you write a comment, just to add your name or your initials to the end. So if you're not logged into Google or a Google linked account, you should still be able to see the document. Claire Summer, can I ask you just to paste the link, or actually, hang on, I've probably got it here. If you don't have it, oh, there we go. Mary's got the link. Great, thanks, Mary. So everybody's got a link to the document, or you have a PDF. We will open the meeting room. It's now 16:20. We will open the meeting room and we'll have a 20-minute discussion. And I'll go around and check in. If you're creating comments, just add your initials if you're not logged in. Great. Okay, so I'm opening all the rooms. Oops, I'm going to do one. So I had an opportunity to just dip in and out of some of the conversations and wide-ranging. I am very much looking forward to the next part of this call as we move within the next 20 minutes to hear some feedback and then close. Maybe just a quick gauge whether people are finding value in this format.
Definitely.
Okay, good. Looks like there's some. Looks like there might be something here. So what we're going to do now is, I know it won't be possible to hear absolutely everything that was shared in the smaller groups. However, working with the Guardians, we thought we might invite 5 people, and we didn't pick them in advance, so there's no telling yet who those might be. But to invite 5 people to each spend 2 minutes sharing, based on what you've just heard and engaged in your smaller groups, what your hopes are for continued engagement with the work of GRLI. So it's kind of an open question. You might want to emphasize something around governance, or you might want to emphasize something around our engagement model, or around the content of our work, or the scope of our work, etc. But if you could be as specific as possible in giving us this feedback, it will it will certainly help us align and continue to develop our strategic direction and also, of course, design future meetings and initiatives. So I see that on the chat, there says, oh, Mary asked, can we keep the list of comments? I've put loads in from the last breakout. We are keeping the list of comments, but stuff that you type into the breakout rooms, I'm not sure what happens to those. So you need to, that's what, yeah, you need to put your comments into the main group chat. Please cut and paste your comments into the main group chat to make sure that they don't get lost. Okay. So for those of you who are not going to have an opportunity now to speak, you are invited to also submit your comments in the main chat. We can see who it is that is submitting the comments. Okay, we've got a few people who are not on mute, but it could be that they are people who absolutely have to speak. So the question is, what are your hopes for continued engagement with the work of the GRLI? I'm going to put us back on video view, and it's basically pop when you are hot. So anyone who is ready to go is welcome, and we will work it out. Gwenola, you have 2 minutes.
Sure. Because GRLI is a network of network, and it has a very specific platform. It's working with education, it's working with research and other organizations, but always on very open spaces, right? Inviting people to be themselves and connect beyond what people can say, ego. I've always thought that other organizations and events would benefit greatly from hosting GRLI. So we have a number of organizations related to responsible management education. And I would be interested in seeing GRLI being hosted at EFMD event, AACSB, GBSN event, SDSN events, you know, to have this possibility while meeting at other events that might be more driven on research, more driven on strategy, etc., to have spaces where people are invited really to connect one-to-one and on this very specific way that GRLI creates. So yeah, that's been on my mind for a while, and I see a potential in this in the future.
Very, very good. Thanks. Thanks, Gwenola. Great. So you took only 1 minute and 15 seconds. Is there someone who would like to go next? Wayne.
It came a little bit out of our discussion, but just a reflection on how we can work with GRI to define what it means to be radical in this space now, especially since you are this spider in the web. And is it possible to be radical in that role, especially given the nature of the organizations that are in the GRLI network and the networks that you're networking with, which tend to be still fairly conservative. So it's to work that out, the special nature of GRLI, the way it approaches things which we don't want to lose, and yet the recognition which we've had now for a little while that we need to step up to a more urgent agenda. How do we do that? I'm interested in continuing to work on that. And at a more practical level, of course, we're interested in seeing whether we can host the November event for GRLI here in Antwerp. That's for another discussion.
So if I could just add to what Wayne said, I tried to explain to one of our newcomers sort of the way in which the GRLI works as a network of networks and all the value that it's created for me in terms of launching projects. And I loved Wayne's simplification of my more complicated statement, because he said we are a spider in the web. So I think it's a brilliant metaphor. And as I've been thinking about this, Wayne, over the last few minutes, I've also been thinking about, you know, spiders' feet in the web are kind of sticky because they're actually making a web. And so how radical can one be with that stickiness? So I'd love to advance your metaphor and really think about how do we become more radical, and does that require a reconceptualization of something besides being sticky in a web? So thanks for that.
Thank you. Thanks, Wayne, for challenging us on the radicalness, and of course, very shortly following on that with the innovation that we're used to, Mary managing to steal the last 30 seconds of Wayne's 2-minute update. So thank you, Mary, for that. Filippo, you had your hand up, if you would like to go next.
Sure, thank you. So as I was saying in the group before, I see an opportunity in organizing meetings, either real meetings or virtuals, in which we share our concrete experiences on the ground. So say I'm sharing with you the experiments I'm doing in Bologna, you are sharing with me the experiments you're doing in Belgium or wherever you are based. That will be very valuable, at least to my eyes. Also to let us know each other on a deeper level, on the technicalities as well of our approach, the content that we like, the future that we envision. And that probably would enable a different level of discussion sometimes. That's my feeling. And then another observation related to the issue of the existence of the organization. I think that's beautiful to see that an organization assesses its own existence, the need of its own existence. I would add that there could be an opportunity to see also the evolution of the organization into something else, or the fact that the organization will be generating other organizations to address other needs. So yeah, I think that looking at this issue in a dynamic and fluid way could broaden our horizons. Also because many things are changing out there in the world, and new needs are coming out of the students community, for example. So I think it's good to keep the eyes open and the mind open on different possibilities.
Thank you, Filippo. We're doing well on time, so anyone else who'd like to go? We can probably do 3 more if we go at this pace, at least. So I see the hand of Chris Taylor and then Pierre Tapi.
Thanks. I have 2 things. So I'm currently preparing a white paper and a web platform exploring the issue of the climate emergency and the possibility of civilizational collapse and how we respond to the collapse agenda. And I'd love GRLI to be a part of that, to add its logo, and institutions that are starting to deal with that and look at that within their curriculum to be added as a resource on the web platform. So that's one thing. And the second,
sorry, Chris, can you see a bit more about what it is that it's about? A book about civilization's collapse?
It's about the potential for collapse that arises from the current climate and ecological emergency. Mm-hmm. So the potential that collapse might be imminent, and if it is, how would we respond to it? How would we build resilience?
Good, thank you.
Yeah, and the second thing is a bit closer to home, and that's about leveraging student voices within GRLI. And I'd love us to explore during 2020 how we might do that. And consider that carefully so that in future years we can build something into our governance structures around student voice. So I'm happy to be part of that process if GRLI would want to do that.
Right, thanks. And maybe we can get the latest copy from you, Chris Taylor, of that work. I think Pierre is already unmuted, and then we have Chris Taylor. Let me just have a look. We've got a lot of men. Sorry, I have to say we are a little bit. Yeah, okay, there you go, Pierre.
John, yeah, briefly, 2 points. First, I think that considering the urgency, climate urgency and social urgency, including the apparition of the political regimes we are seeing together today, the sunset clause that was designed for GRLI 5 years ago is really today something that the board should dismiss. And I know you are in the way to postpone that, but I think that's very, very wise to do so. And second, among the three verbs that you put on what we do, advocate, initiate, and facilitate, I am wondering whether you should also add scale up, because we are a place to exchange of best experience and best practices all around the world. And I think that pushing scaling up can be among the missions of GRLI also.
Thank you for your input, Pierre. Chris, sorry, maybe Chris was trying to say, oh no, there you are. Chris Laszlo, you were, yep.
Sorry. Which Chris are you inviting? John, you're on mute.
Chris, it was Chris Laszlo. My apologies.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah, thank you. Actually, you know, Chris Taylor's point, I'm sorry to be, I don't mean to be speaking too much on this, but, you know, Chris Taylor's point about the potential collapse of civilization. And you know, many of you may have seen there was an article in Nature, the scientific journal this month, talking about how incredibly off track the world is to meet the Sustainable Development Goals by 2030. And I wonder, what is GRLI's position going to be? Is it going to be that we build on all the good accomplishments that are taking place and that we are encouraging the world to continue to build on this? It also gets to the idea of the need for radical innovation, because continue to do more of what we're doing, we know is going to make us fall far short of the goals, except in 1 or 2 cases. Infant mortality and education levels are on track. But the other SDGs, particularly biodiversity and climate change, are so far off that do we need to play this kind of role where it's we are really addressing that reality? I'll just stop there.
Great, thanks. I'm just looking at the time. We've got about 4 minutes left. We've got about 28 people left on the call. I would like to suggest that we do a round. The way we're going to do this is whoever's ready says one word and say the person that they would like to hear from next. So we will close with one word just to ensure that we have that we have everyone's voice in the room. Before we do that, from my side, thank you very much. I think we will continue doing this in some form or another. Following this meeting, we will edit the recording of the meeting so that we have a good record of what we worked on. We will harvest the notes. If you haven't been able to paste your notes and comments into the chat or into the document, please send them by email. Because we are going into the board meeting on the 17th of February, if I'm not mistaken, 17th or 18th. And we would like to ensure that what we take into board in terms of strategic direction is representative of the energy and the focus of the participants here today and the wider partnership. So we're going to close with one word. Whoever's ready to go first is welcome to go, and then once you've said your word, just say someone else's name so that they can say their word. Thanks so much.
Connection and Marie.
Action, Mary.
Inspirational, Aurora. Oh, sorry, I'm reading that completely wrong. Pierre. I thought we had a Pierre on the.
Oh, excuse me.
Yeah.
Technically remarkable and inspirational. Chris.
Community. Dan.
Ganola.
Thank you. I don't have a word. I'm grateful. And only a few people know, but it's actually my first working meeting of the year because I had a fracture and a surgery. So I'm grateful to professionally start the year with you.
Oh.
We'll keep everyone on unmute just to make this a bit easier. Okay, Gwenola, who are you nominating?
Wait a minute. Just you didn't speak?
Sorry, was that me?
Filippo.
Oh, Filippo, sorry.
Here I am. Thanks, Gwenola. Hope is my word. And I'd like to hear a word from Chris Laszlo.
My word is consciousness, and I pass it to Anne.
That was correctly pronounced. Thank you, Chris. You've been learning Finnish. Co-creation. And Rumina.
Thank you. Challenged. Hanna-Lena.
Thanks, Romina. Systemic change. And I will go to Julia.
Thank you. Happy. So nice to see all your smiling faces. I'll go to Anders.
Warmth. Meredith.
Next steps, if I can combine one together. Elizabeth?
Oh, I started with connection, but I'll say it again.
John?
Gratitude. Which John? There you go. John Knights, you go ahead of him.
Okay. We have the why and the how, so my word is what. And Otti.
Thanks, John. I'm a businessman, so I stick to your what, and my word is impact. And from here, I think Hanna-Lena.
Oh my God. I used the systemic change already. What else? Decade of action. Who is left?
Joanna.
Is there someone left?
I have another go.
Vanessa.
Claire.
All right.
You go.
I was just going to say innovation.
Mine's warmth. And Jeff.
Jeff, scale.
Mine is challenging. And who else is left?
Mine is leapfrog.
Mine is passion.
Thanks, Anna. Wonderful. Marie.
I've been saying my actions, so I can't remember what you said, but I like the word community, so I repeat that if that's already been said. Community. And Anders?
Yeah, I'll go again. Thanks for that.
So I think
what now? What now?
What now? Great. I'm just checking. Have we got everyone? We're learning a lot about doing checkouts virtually, aren't we? So thank you so much. If you haven't said a word yet, please say it now, but I'm going to stop the call, and thank you all for joining us.
Thank you.
Much appreciated.